Awesome ants. My friend Ben and I were doing our science homework a week after Halloween when the package arrived. I heard the doorbell ring and I looked out my bedroom window. A huge delivery truck was parked in the drive. I'd better get that, I told Ben. My parents aren't home from work yet. Ben followed me downstairs. A man with a clipboard stood waiting at the door. Delivery for Dave Warren, he said. Hey, that's me, I answered excitedly. I couldn't believe it. I never got mail. The delivery man pointed to the clipboard. Sign here, he said, on the line, right across from Awesome Ants Inc. Then I remembered. I had sent away for an ant farm. I've been waiting for this for weeks, I told Ben. Waiting for what? Ben asked as I signed for the package. The ant farm I ordered from the back of one of my comic books, I explained. You know, we have to do that science project for Mr. Lantz. My project will be observing ants. Giant thrills, Ben said, rolling his eyes. Ben is not into insects, but our teacher, Mr. Lantz, likes insects a lot. Mr. Lantz thinks anything with 6 legs is a genius. So, where do you want it? The delivery man asked. Just bring it into the house, I said. I'll take it up to my room. The man gave me a strange look. I don't think that's gonna work, he said. Why not? I asked. Well, see for yourself, the delivery man answered. Ben and I followed him around to the back of his truck. He opened the big double doors. Then he lowered a ramp that led to the ground and climbed into the back of the truck. A second delivery man climbed out of the front of the truck. He jogged up the ramp to help his partner. Ben and I heard something shuffling. Then the 2 men started to grunt and groan. This is really weird, Ben said. We heard more grunting. Finally, the 2 men pushed a huge carton to the back of the truck and down the ramp. It was bigger than my dad's pool table. Wait a minute, I yelped. There's got to be a mistake. I ordered an ant farm. This can't be. The driver pointed to the address label on the package. There's no mistake, he said. The package is from Awesome Ants and the label is made out to you. So, where do you want it? Could you put it in my backyard? I asked. The 2 men pushed and pulled. At last, they got the giant carton into the yard. They set it down across from the picnic table. The delivery men walked back to their truck. Oh, I almost forgot, the driver said. He pulled out a smaller package, about the size of a basketball. This package goes with the big one. It's for you too. Maybe that's the ant farm, I thought. I took the smaller box and stood there watching the truck drive off. What are you waiting for? Ben cried. Let's unwrap all this stuff. And so we did. We went to the backyard and we tore off the brown paper that covered the enormous package. Sure enough, inside we found a giant ant farm. The farm had clear plastic walls. It was filled halfway to the top with pale reddish sand. It was great. But I couldn't believe how big it was. This is way weird, I said nervously. What's in the smaller box? Ben asked. I opened it and found a letter at the top. It said, Dear customer, you have been chosen to help us test our new super jumbo awesome ant farm at no cost to you. Let us know how your colony develops. We think you will have an awesome experience. Awesome Ants Incorporated. That's great, Ben said. That's like winning the lottery. Inside the box, I also found a little white plastic container. The label read ants. Open container, shake into sand in farm. I also found a large plastic bottle in the box. Its label read awesome ant food. Add 5 gel caps per day to ant farm. Warning, do not feed the ants anything else. Ben opened up the ant container and peered inside. Totally normal ants, he reported. He handed me the container. He was right. The ants were tiny. Some were black, some were red. They looked like the kind you would see anywhere. I looked at the ants, then I looked at their gigantic home. I'll never be able to find them in there, I said, pointing to the farm. They're going to get lost. And you won't be able to take the ant farm to school and impress Mr. Lantz, right? Ben said. You want to do an ant project. Because Mr. Lantz says ants are the best engineers in the world. You just want to be the teacher's pet. Oh, give me a break, I told Ben. I just like ants. Well, then put them in the ant farm, Ben urged. I opened the lid and shook the ants out of their container. Just as I thought, they seemed to disappear into the sand. Then we opened the big plastic container of food. It was filled with blue gel caps. These are bigger than the ants, I said. They look like blue vitamins. What ant is going to eat a blue vitamin instead of food? Ben shrugged. Maybe the ants like them. If they don't, we'll feed them a moth or a caterpillar. Ants like to eat other insects. I dropped 5 blue gel caps into the farm, then I peered through the clear plastic walls. I found the ants all huddled in one corner. They're not eating the food, I said. They're just sitting there. Maybe they're not hungry, Ben replied. There. One is walking over to a gel cap, I said. I was getting excited about observing the ants. I wanted to write an amazing science report for Mr. Lantz. Maybe I could prove that huge ant farms were good for ants, or bad for ants, or something. Ben and I watched the ant farm until it got dark. The ants were pretty boring. They didn't eat any of the food, and they hardly moved. What was I going to put in my paper? The next day, Ben stopped by my house after school. I was out back observing the ant farm again. Nothing was happening. Ants are really smart and well organized, I said to Ben. They're supposed to build a room for the queen and places for the eggs. These ants haven't done anything. That's because you're only feeding them blue gel caps, Ben urged. Ants eat bread, crumbs, and pieces of hamburger and other bugs, stuff like that. Ben walked over to one of the trees in the backyard. He found a caterpillar on a branch. Here, let's give this to the ants, he said. Maybe real food will help. No, don't, I cried. The instructions said not to feed them anything. But Ben wasn't listening. He carried the caterpillar to the ant farm. I started after him. Ben, no, I shouted, but before I could stop him, he dropped the caterpillar into the farm. I ran over to see what would happen, and I saw the ants turn around toward the caterpillar. Then they swarmed all over it. See, Ben demanded, awesome ants need real food. Now they'll start building tunnels, and you can impress Mr. Lantz after all. I decided Ben was probably right about the caterpillar. I mean, the ants looked pretty excited about it. Before I went to sleep that night, I took some cookie crumbs out to the ants and a few little pieces of apple and one of my mum's leftover meatballs. The next morning, I checked the ant farm before I went to school. The ants were doing just what they were supposed to. They were clearing spaces for rooms. The rooms were all connected by tunnels in the sand, and the ants were very busy rushing back and forth. This is excellent, I told the ants. I wonder what would happen if I stirred up all the sand and ruined your tunnels. Maybe I'll try that after a few days to see if you rebuild. And I want to take some of you to school. Mr. Lantz will help me look at you under a microscope. I don't know if the ants heard what I was saying, but they slowed down while I talked. I sat down at the picnic table and wrote some notes about what I fed the ants and how active they were. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the ants looked bigger. I made a note of that too. Then I reached in, pulled out a few ants, and dropped them into a paper cup. Carrying them carefully, I hurried to school. I took notes on the ant farm for a week in the morning and just before dark. I fed the ants table scraps every night. I threw in some more blue gel caps, but the ants never touched them. They knew what they liked. I also measured the ants. I held my ruler up against the clear plastic. The ants were definitely getting bigger. Some of them were over an inch long. That weekend, I couldn't watch the ant farm. My parents and I visited my grandmother's house. On Friday afternoon, I left the ants lots of food scraps. I even gave them some of my leftover Halloween candy. When I woke up Monday morning, the house was really quiet. My parents had left for work early. I dressed quickly and went downstairs. I ate a couple of donuts, and then I grabbed my books and a handful of cereal for the ants and went out to the backyard. I dropped the cereal into the sand, but something was very wrong. I couldn't see any ants in the tunnels. I peered through the plastic walls, the chambers, the passageways. They were all still there, but they were empty. I sat at the picnic table in a daze. The ants were gone, all of them. My science project was doomed without them. By the time I checked my watch, it was almost 9 o'clock. I threw my book bag over my shoulder and ran all the way to school. The halls were empty when I finally got there. I told myself it was because everyone was already in class. I'd never been this late before. I wondered if I should go to the office for a late pass, but science was first class, and I decided just to go to class. Mr. Lantz was pretty nice. Maybe he'll just let me in. I walked down the silent hallway. My heart was pounding. My footsteps echoed like drum beats. I opened the door to Mr. Lantz's classroom and gasped in surprise. The room was empty. No students, no Mr. Lantz. Was there a field trip I'd forgotten about? No, I saw books lying open on the desks. Where was everyone? Even the 2 pet guinea pigs in the back of the classroom were gone from their cages. Then I heard a noise from the back of the classroom, a giant scratching noise. There were 2 closets at the back of the room. I opened the first one, saw nothing but stacks of textbooks. Then I was sure the scratching came from the second closet. That's where Mr. Lantz kept all his science supplies. I heard more scratching, and then I heard a clicking sound. I took a deep breath and opened the closet door. There stood a red ant, half a foot taller than me. Its 2 red antennas began to wave wildly. One of them brushed my face. I screamed. I couldn't move. My muscles were all frozen. The ant opened and closed its giant jagged jaws. The clicking sound, that's what made it. Then the ant rubbed its 2 front feet together, making the scratching sound I had heard. Before I could shut the closet door, the monster staggered out. My muscles unlocked. I began to stumble backward. I didn't take my eyes off the creature. I banged into a desk. The ant lurched closer. Its eyes were on the side of its head. I was in front of the ant. Could it see me? The long feelers snaked toward me. I gasped as they touched the sides of my face. Then the ant leaned over me. Its upper legs reached out to grab me. Run, I told myself. Run for your life. I turned and raced out of the room and down the hall. I ran so fast, I fell and slid along the floor to the end of the hall. Then I picked myself up and scrambled out the side door of the building. I stood still for a second, catching my breath. Then I heard the heavy door creak behind me. I turned to see the red ant lumbering out of the school. I ran for the high, thick hedge at the side of the schoolyard. I headed for the narrow, secret opening in the hedge that I knew was there. I squeezed through the opening to the vacant lot on the other side of the hedge. I stopped again. I was hidden from the ant. What next? I had to get help. I didn't have time to think. I heard the hedges rustle. I looked up and saw a long, skinny ant leg reaching over the top of the hedge, and then another leg, and then the slender feelers waving and reaching. I turned and ran down the street as fast as I could. I ran so fast I thought the muscles in my legs would snap. So hard that my sides ached, but I heard it close behind me, 6 ant feet tapping against the pavement, the jagged jaws clicking. I didn't turn back, but I could hear it. I knew that it was getting closer. When the feelers poked at my arms, I screamed. Then 2 of the spindly red legs closed around my waist. I felt myself lifted up in the air. The ant was so huge. Its head was so huge. Its jaws opened wide. I kicked and screamed, struggling to free myself. The jagged jaws closed around my waist. To my shock, the ant didn't hurt me. It just held me. Then the creature plodded off in a familiar direction. I was helpless. I couldn't get away. It carried me straight to my backyard. I couldn't believe my eyes. Our yard was filled with giant ants, black ones, red ones. They were standing in long, straight lines. They were waiting for something. The red ant set me down gently on the grass. Within seconds, a circle of black ants had surrounded me. Were they closing in to attack? I shut my eyes. I could barely breathe, and then I felt something pressed against my mouth. I opened my eyes and saw a black ant holding one of the blue gel caps. It was trying to force me to eat it. I twisted my head to the side, but 2 ants held me. The red ant's spindly forelegs pried my jaws open. It placed the gel cap in my mouth at the back of my throat. I gulped, felt the blue pill slide down my throat. Instantly, I felt dizzy. So dizzy that I crumpled to the ground. Then everything went black. When I slowly opened my eyes, I heard voices. I blinked several times, struggling to focus. I saw faces above me, familiar faces. "Mr. Lantz," I cried. "Ben!" Was the whole science class there? "Yeah." "Hey," I choked out. I sat up. Where was I? The ground was soft, sandy. Whoa, I was sitting in red sand. I started to stand up and bang my forehead on something hard. A wall of clear, hard plastic. "Mr. Lantz, where are we?" I cried, rubbing my forehead. "Those ants you brought to school," he said, "they grew so fast, Dave. They grabbed us all. They put us in here." "In where?" I demanded, still dizzy. I peered out through the plastic wall, and I saw the ants staring in at us, studying us. And I knew where we were. We were inside the ant farm. "Mr. Lantz, get us out of here," I wailed. "How do we get out? How?" He scratched his head. "I'm not sure. I guess we'd better get busy." "Excuse me," I cried. "Busy? We don't know how long we have to stay in here, the teacher replied, so we'd better get to work. We'd better build rooms for ourselves and tunnels to get to the rooms. Come on, everyone, get to work. But I sputtered, it will be a wonderful learning experience, Mr. Lantz said. Don't you agree? Awesome, I replied.
Just kidding, guys. It's just me. Hey, look, if you are after more chills, thrills, and... Did I mention chills? Please subscribe to the Leftovers channel. I'll be doing a whole bunch more super spooky material, especially the Goosebumps book reading. I've tracked down every single one of those 10 tales to give you goosebumps, and I will be reading each story. So subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you can keep getting notified. You know how the system works. And yeah, tune in next time for some more Leftovers from the Leftover Culture Review.